god, this is so weird. This is so weird seeing you.
Well, hopefully weird in a good way. I don't know.
See, I never really fully believed that they were in love with each other. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Buile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to be breaking down everything that we saw unfold between Paul and Micah on Love is Blind Season 4. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? First of all, as always, we have a spoiler alert. I'm going to be talking about things that have happened on the show, who ends up together. So if you don't want spoilers, finish and come back. And of course, always remember the disclaimer that I am none of these people's therapist. I am analyzing edited content. So that means that we're not seeing everything play all the way through, right? There's a lot that's left out with these narratives. Even though I'm giving an analysis on these people, I'm giving an analysis on them based on how they were presented on the show. So let's talk about first impressions, the pods. I thought it was very interesting that one of the first conversations we hear Micah have, and I talked about this in the last video, is that she tells COAMFTE.
I would kind of maybe consider myself like an empath, so it's like important to surround myself with like really genuine people.
So my initial impression of her was skepticism. I was automatically thinking, okay, this is a person who speaks in platitudes and cliches, and I was just curious about how that was going to unfold in terms of making genuine connections. Ultimately, we did see the type of people that she surrounds herself with. Initial impression of Paul was actually really not good, because I was noticing in the very first dates that we saw with Paul, one with Amber, one with Micah, he said to both of them basically things that suggested that he saw a wedding with them. And I know he's just joking around, but I thought it was kind of weird that he was saying with such confidence. He promised Amber they were gonna have beignets at their wedding, and he promised Micah.
Hey, listen, when we get married, that's reason for us to go back. How's that?
He talked with both of them about Italy.
Absolutely in love with Italy. I love it so much.
Oh my God, okay, that's the next place I'm going.
With Micah, she says that her favorite city is Positano, and then Amber is a flight attendant. That's where she's heading next. He's like, can I come with you? So I was getting Playboy vibes only because it seems like he was kind of trying to charm them by baiting a wedding or marriage in front of them. And I thought that was a very interesting first impression for us as the audience to see. Obviously, the girls that were on the dates with him didn't know what he'd said to other people, but I remember thinking like, is this a game to him? Is he just trying to see how many women he can get to be invested in moving forward with him right off the bat? One of the pod dates that we saw that was a turning point for Paul and Micah was when they started talking about how time moves so quickly and the importance of taking pleasure and romanticizing the small things in life. And I thought that was a really good thing to connect on. I think that's a similar life value in taking gratitude in small pleasures. Not everyone looks at life that way. Paul says in that date,
oh my gosh, we're like literally on the same page with that. So attracted to that, jeez.
And later on, throughout their journey, when he's talking to people about his relationship with Micah, he says, we look at life the same way. I can't really confirm or deny whether or not that was true. Obviously, for those of us looking at it on the surface, they seem like two very, very different sort of people. However, we don't hear the conversations happening behind closed doors. We didn't see every single date that they had in the pods. And maybe there were even more conversations, I'm assuming, that made Paul feel that they thought similarly. Over time, I learned to trust Paul's way of thinking through things. He makes a lot of sense with his analysis of things. He's so analytical, and I appreciated the logic he would bring to his choices. So if he felt that they thought similarly, even though we didn't see that, I do trust his opinion on that, just because he's the type of person that tries to base his opinion on more objective data. Where we really start seeing Paul and Micah starting to come together was really when they started recognizing the threat of their other connections. And this was always my problem with their journey, is that I felt that they were both feeling more competitive than they were connected. Micah asked Paul, what are your thoughts about Amber? Because she overhears Amber talking about Paul in the girls' lounge and how much she's enjoying him. Then soon after that, Paul gets Amber flowers, and then Paul overhears COAMFTE. talking about how Micah is his top person. And the conversation that they ultimately have, to me, it almost came out of nowhere. And Micah does say, like, you know, Paul kind of came out of nowhere. They both basically have this very timid conversation where neither one of them wants to take responsibility and own their feelings. They both have a guard up by saying things like,
Do you think if we agreed to just go for each other, maybe you wouldn't feel risky to me anymore?
I think so.
So basically what you're saying is that you are both worried about getting dumped. You don't like the idea of this person being with someone else. It just gave the impression that they were both more scared of being left than being together. Paul even says immediately after they make that decision,
Sorry, Chloe, but I prefer me.
why would you even be talking about Kwame in this moment? This should be a moment where you're celebrating that you found your person. It shouldn't be about this other person that was posing a threat. I feel like both of them kind of gaslit Kwame and Amber. Kwame especially, because Micah says things to him like,
I want this to stay between us, but like I really am like falling for you. And like, I haven't said that to anyone else.
and this is like right before she ended up breaking up with him. And I just thought that was interesting that it was like a keep this between us. If you're having strong feelings for someone, why keep them a secret, especially in a process where everybody knows who everyone is dating? And then she goes,
So you better not go falling for anyone else.
so again, we're looking at this competitive angle. I just want to be possessive and have as many people interested in me as possible, or the people I'm interested in, I don't want them trying to possibly make connections with other people while I'm doing the same thing. That's how it felt. In those situations, both Amber and Kwame were both very surprised. Amber's last date with Paul, he brought her flowers, and then the next date, he's breaking up with her. So it's just one of those things where you have two people who seem to be relatively egocentric. They're more concerned about the wounds of being rejected than they are about ensuring that you're picking the person that's the best fit for you. My opinion on Micah was fluctuating because first she seems like this cool person. I can understand why she had multiple strong connections, but then whenever you see her with Irina, she's doing things that makes it seem like she's being mean, but it's almost like she doesn't take full ownership of it. She keeps having Irina do the mean things. Irina's complimenting Amber on the flowers Paul gets her.
Oh my God, these are so fucking cute and bright, just like you.
And then Micah's like, you know, she was on a date with Paul, right? Basically, you know, like, oh, you shouldn't be so excited about that. Later on, when Paul breaks up with Amber, then Micah's like, go listen to what they're talking about. You could have done that yourself, but you're sending Irina over there, and Irina obviously is doing it. But Micah seems like one of those people who can be somewhat manipulative. Like, you play to your strengths and you use other people like a chessboard. Now, don't get me wrong. Irina has to take full responsibility for the choices that she makes. But I think that Micah's kind of getting by scot-free when a lot of what happened were her choices, her actions. Even when we fast forward to her meeting Kwame and the inappropriateness of the conversations that she was having with him. Yet, when Irina was doing the same thing, now she's got to call Irina out for it. Now, granted, they are friends, so I can understand it's more of like a betrayal, a loyalty thing. But at the same time, the way you're saying you're flirting with someone's fiance, you were just doing the same exact thing. So she doesn't seem to have a ton of self-awareness. I don't think she fully understands why she's attracted to those people and those people are attracted to her. She talks about keeping genuine people around her, and I think it's ironic that in the end, both of her close connections we saw, Irina and then ultimately Shelby, they really weren't for her. Irina is flirting with your fiance and Shelby is laughing when you are left heartbroken at the altar. By the end of the second episode, I remember writing that if Paul and Micah work out, I would be shocked. They both had a lot of guards up, and I think ultimately that is what Paul was referencing when he just said that the nurturing element wasn't there for him. And we'll talk about that later in the video. But Paul is admittedly in his head and very analytical. And I think Micah often likes to have the power and the upper hand in situations. Because of that, I think that is what prevented her from validating Kwame. Like, you know, she's like, oh, is Chelsea more validating toward you and more reciprocal with her feelings, like expressing them? And he's like, yeah, that's exactly it. get. And Micah's like not going to provide him with that because that is too vulnerable and it's putting her in a position of not having the higher ground. And so even later on when we see Micah making fun of Kwame at the pool about to fail proposals, it's a way of reminding him that I got you to choose me and then now you want to act like you want to be with her. But what's his other option? We talked about all of this in the Chelsea and Kwame video, but I thought Micah's perspective on that was really weird, that you seem almost upset that he moved forward with Chelsea when you're the one who broke up with him. And now you're trying to have your cake and eat it too by being engaged to Paul, but telling Kwame, no matter what happens, I'll be here. Like, I really will. I really will. How many times can you emphasize the fact that you're willing to be disloyal to your fiance to be whatever Kwame's needing from you in that moment? Paul struggles so much with his emotions. That breakup with Amber, I mean, could he have been more coy?
I can't really hear you. You're kind of mumbling.
That has been a, what? You're so certain about this. And Micah asked him, are you certain? She was even trying to control how Paul broke up with her. Are you going to bring it up at the beginning of the session or are you going to drag it out? Like, let him break up with Amber whatever way he sees fit. Like, why are you trying to tell him how to break up with her? But she asked him if he's certain and he was like, yeah. And you can even tell in this moment as he's breaking up with Amber, he doesn't seem certain. And he's having the hardest time communicating why he's breaking up with her. And I don't think he really had a solid reason. That's why he's having a hard time with expressing why this is happening. After the proposal, that's where we started seeing, I think, a major shift with Paul and Micah. So as Paul predicted, his hypothesis was if they can make the choice to just be together, it'll be less risky, which I interpret as it'll be easier to open up and allow yourself to actually be vulnerable. And I think that is what happened, right? After they made that choice, a lot of my worries about them started to subside, at least when it came to Paul. So, he was starting to share, that he felt comfort and loved when he's in the presence of Micah. And Micah is like, I'm so excited about this future with him. The thing with Micah is that so much of what she says is complicated by the flirting with Kwame that it's very hard to take what she says as absolute fact. And so even though when they were together, I'm like, they have this really cute relationship that seems like they really are like building a bond over time. Those moments where they're flirting with other people, for me, it really problematizes the claims that she's making in regards to being in a relationship with him and wanting to be with him. And I do put Paul there too, because even though there has been a ton of focus on Irina flirting with Paul, if you watch the footage back, Paul isn't exactly being firm in boundaries with her. I mean, she puts her finger in front of his face. He's biting at it, when they hug, it's an extended hug together. So even though he might just be a friendly guy, I think Paul might be one of those guys who's like just a kind of touchy person in general. Even in the guys lounge, you could tell like he had kind of like a relationship with the guys where, they were all kind of like not afraid to touch each other. They can, be a little bit more on the feely end with the bromance or whatever. So that might just be how he is. Even later on in the reunion, they shared, touching one of her friends as he was walking past, and they're like, see, he touched her, and he's like, that's just me passing her. And I do believe him. I don't think there was anything going on with them. I mean, if something came out, that would be a surprise to me. But, I think that he might just be a very touchy-feely person. So, originally watching it, I was more so frustrated with Irina, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. But watching it back, Paul could have been a little bit more verbal and vocal in establishing physical boundaries with her. Now, Micah, she didn't have to establish boundaries because she was the one crossing them. So it is one of those things where their bond was growing over time, but their flirtation with other people really did complicate my investment in their journey. And again, who am I? Who cares what I think? I think that does apply to maybe a lot of the audience at large. I wasn't necessarily excited about Paul and Micah, but I was hopeful. Their reveal was cute and sweet. Paul being as analytical as he is, he shares about a dream that he had and that he was hoping that it was pixelated enough where he wouldn't have too firm of an idea of how Micah looked. And it was really cute. I thought they were being honest. They're like, it's kind of like being with a different person. It's hard to balance the physical expectations with the emotional connection. So they were being honest with each other. They did share a first kiss, you know, a run-of-the-mill reveal. I didn't think there was anything that was, you know, glaringly bad or glaringly good about their proposal or reveal, honestly. Nothing really to talk about. Over time, you start seeing Paul really opening up. He's like, I'm so excited, I'm not gonna lie. You know, he's really shy about it. And then Micah's like, me too, you know. So I felt like that was a consistent thing that we saw, is that Paul seemed to be becoming more and more verbally affectionate and affirming, and physically as well. They talk about cuddling and things. And Micah, she did seem to always maintain a certain distance. You know, when she would talk to the camera or her friends, they're like, are you in love? She's like, yes, I'm absolutely 100% in love. And she would say how much she enjoys being with Paul. But when you see those scenes with them together, I mean, maybe it's just because the cameras are watching, but it seems like she wasn't as open with him. She was not allowing herself to let those guards down. And I do think ultimately that is why Paul was using the word nurturing as something that was missing in their relationship. I think that he was feeling like, you know, he enjoys being with her and he loves that they share a similar worldview. But I think after you keep opening up and the person is responding with me too, after a while, you kind of want to hear what they have to say. And I don't know if he really ever got that, and the assurance that he needed kind of goes back to what we saw in the pods with Kwame. He asked her for validation as well. And she basically, I didn't think, is just saying she's not really that type of person. We'll talk a little bit more about what Paul said about her being a mother in the reunion again a little bit later in the video. But I do think as we're watching these clips, keeping in mind who's initiating the emotional intimacy, who is being honest about their feelings and providing the validation that a lot of us would want if we're especially just beginning out in a new relationship. Micah was really emphasizing pacing. When they're laying in bed, she says to him, like, things just need to come naturally. We need to move slow. She referred to him as a slow burner. Let's keep burning. I think she was very worried about things moving too fast, but you are in a very expedited process. So if you're going to open up, you have to be doing that now. You can't be saying, let's just move really slow, because at the end of the day, you're going to an altar in a matter of weeks. So you have to fast track things to give yourselves the best chance of knowing each other well enough to know if it's going to work long term. I talk a lot more about this in the Chelsea Kwame video, but obviously first time Micah meets Kwame, she's being very inappropriate. And then Paul on the other end has Irina, who is crossing boundaries with him, and he is allowing it. Ultimately, this leads to Micah having a conversation with Irina, which I did actually admire her for. Thought it was good for her to have that one-on-one. It was nice to see that she wasn't afraid of a little confrontation, because I was having the hardest time understanding Micah's character. It just seems so inconsistent. Like, are you a nice person? Are you a mean person? You know, are you just a follower? Are you sneakily manipulating and controlling situations? Very hard to tell what type of person she is. And I still am pretty unclear on her. You know, sometimes she would win me over, and other times I'm like, well, see, there we go again. So she is just one of those people where I think she might just kind of like blend into whatever surrounding she's in with whomever she is with. But I did think it was good that she did feel comfortable to talk with Irina. Now, I will say, I personally think that Irina being attracted to Paul overall ended up helping Paul and Micah's connection. I think Micah seeing that Irina was attracted to Paul confirmed for her that Paul was attractive. Both she and Paul talked about how neither one of them is the other's type.
Like, when I first saw Paul, I was like, not my type.
You know, Paul said he goes for a more granola type girl, and I think Micah said she goes for a completely different type of guy. And so I think having Irina say that he's hot and even go as far as to hit on him, that put Micah back into her competitive space, right? Originally, she's attracted to Paul because of competition from girls in the pods, Amber specifically. And then now, even in the real world, she has someone who is attracted to him and going after him. And I think it was probably part of her motivation to keep building with him. I'm not sure. I mean, it seemed like from the beginning she had, you know, at least a lukewarm interest, but I started seeing a bit of a change in her attraction and level of commitment after that happened. Paul does insinuate an attraction to Irina because he says that, when he saw her outfit, he's trying to keep his eyes up. And, obviously I think that'd be the case for a lot of people. Irina was wearing a very revealing outfit, so that does make sense. But the fact that he was even tempted to look does suggest that, he did find her attractive in some way. The other time that we've seen Micah kind of initiate a conversation that could be difficult when she wanted to talk with Chelsea, I wasn't really sure of the purpose of that. Like, were you going to apologize? It seemed like she was just trying to explain that there was nothing happening, even though realistically it was a very inappropriate conversation. Like, you might have all the right words, but it was a very inappropriate conversation, very inappropriate touching happening with Kwame. So I wasn't sure about the conversation, but that was like our first time seeing like that Micah does not back down from difficult conversations in that way. But it does seem like at the same time, she does have a hard time. Like, those are, I think, more like logical, strategic things, but it seems like the more emotional, feeling-based things, those are the things that she seems to struggle a little bit more with, having those in-depth, meaningful conversations. I even thought it was interesting that when Paul was telling Micah that Zach was saying that if things don't really progress well with Irene, he's gonna end it, and Micah's like,
I mean,
Well, like he's gonna end it. I don't understand why he thinks he like has
that's
this
what I
big
heard
card.
from.
like, she feels that Irina has the power to decide whether or not she's going to end it. And that's my thing, is that I think Micah is so aware of who has power. She wants to ensure that she has power, and she is paying attention to who else has power around her. And so she's like, oh, so what, Zach thinks that he's going to end it? Absolutely. And he did, and he can. So why was that so surprising to her? She thinks, because she finds Irina more attractive than Zach, that he can't break up with her. Those are the sort of things, when she does that kind of stuff, it makes me think, how do you really view people? Or are you viewing everyone in terms of like where you rank against them? Paul says the reason that he didn't establish boundaries up with Irina is because he's so secure and confident relationship with Micah. He seems super sincere. It doesn't look good, but I do believe his logic. I will say that those little conversations, I would always be like, okay, I see Micah, she's making efforts, seems like they're getting better. And then I even liked it when she said that she admits that she was one of the people that was poking fun at Zach.
I feel like I've been like guilty of kind of like laughing along at like the whole like
Sure, yeah.
Zach thing, because he's like such a character, but like when it comes down to it, I feel like he did come into this very open.
I'm like, okay, she's got the self-awareness, but she just always was coming in and out of like the self-awareness of, I'm doing these things, I'm hurting people, and then back into doing things that hurt people. It was like a roller coaster. I was having a hard time really making sense of her character. And to this day, I'm still extremely confused about who the kind of person that she is. What's interesting is I realized my notes, I don't have a lot about Paul and Micah. I just feel like there was so much not to comment on. It was like, okay, regular, run of the mill. I feel like them as individuals, there was more to talk about than them as a couple. And that might be a good thing. Maybe there just wasn't a lot to unpack because things are just going so well. So one of my favorite things for Paul and Micah's relationship, and the things that we saw, is when we meet Paul's mom, and it's like, oh, this makes sense. Because the whole time I'm like, how is this going to work? They're so different. But once you meet Paul's mom, you're like, okay, she's a glam girl. She's got the bleach blonde hair, and it seems like she knows how to work social media. She said she found Micah with just her name. I'm like, okay, now I get it. There are a lot of similarities between his mom and Micah. And so that was a really cute thing, and they immediately connected. And I'm very big on the relationship with in-laws. If you have a solid relationship with your in-laws, it does help your relationship, because when there are those moments where one of you might be second guessing things, or you're needing some support and understanding your partner, it is nice to be able to talk to someone who's known your partner longer than you have. And so I love to see that. It's always like one of my favorite things. That's the heartwarming moment for me, is when the in-law meets the partner or potential partner, and there's an immediate connection. And that's what we saw with Micah and his mom. Of course, when Paul met Micah's family, similar. They just were very open to him. No issues. Again, nothing really to comment on other than great first meeting. I just can't believe there's so many Pauls that would have been in their family had they gotten married. Now we have to talk about Micah's friend, Shelby. This girl, I'm like, okay, so that's why you were attracted to someone like Arena in the pods, because this is your best friend in real life and this is the negative energy they automatically put out. Shelby had absolutely nothing to stand on. She's like, I want the best for you and this isn't it. Okay, what is? If she could have gotten specific, I just think that ultimately you're not going to be attracted to him long term. He's not your type, or he's very analytical and you are a kind of person that's very spontaneous. She gave absolutely nothing. She just wanted to say that basically her energy assessment would be enough. And she takes pride in ending Micah's previous relationships.
Shelby has single-handedly terminated relationships for me. A couple of them.
You all have to be so aware of that. If you have these friends who find such value in influencing your life, maybe that's the only thing that brings their life value. Maybe them being meddling and controlling over what you're doing is what gives them a sense of worth. Oh, I know best. I love them better. And so it just seemed that she was like just being that friend that's jealous. And one of her friends was like, you're hating. She's like, I'm not hating. I really respected Paul for being like,
She's easily angered.
I mean, can't say that I care.
the way that Micah responded to that, she's like, oh, well, you should care. You definitely should care if she likes you. Why? If anything, you should care that someone you love is making someone else you claim to love feel very uncomfortable. I think back to Bliss advocating for Zach with her dad in this process. She's like, I know what I'm doing. That is the energy that I would have expected from Micah, but instead Paul gets into this impossible situation. And I was like, I hope Paul's paying attention. This is not a person who seems to be interested in supporting Micah and helping her think through her choices. These are people who are either encouraging her to be more conniving, hitting on you in the case of Irina, like very disloyal, or in the case with Shelby, being very demanding and unwelcoming, and Micah then taking up for her and not for you. Shelby's in her comfort zone. I think this is her birthday party, right? She even says, is this a shot for you or for me? For Micah to not notice that, I just feel like she is not a great judge of character, and it makes me question who she is as a person, that these are the people you feel not only comfortable with, but you feel like this is a person worth defending. I do agree that we want our partners and our friends to get along, but if our friends are being mean, I know later on Micah was kind of defending him a little bit, but I did not like how she was talking to him in front of Shelby. So your friends can be rude, but Paul wasn't allowed to say that he doesn't care. To me, Shelby reminded me of people who are so afraid about the people around them elevating and moving on in life, and then you're left behind. That's what it looked like to me. You're worried about Micah focusing her attention on someone other than you. For you to meet someone and immediately say you deserve the world, are you the world, Shelby? Are you saying that you're the world that she deserves, and anything that's not you, she deserves better? The next important thing with Paul and Micah was when they were talking about the fact that Micah lives in two different states. She lives in Seattle part-time and then she lives in Arizona part-time. And Paul seemed very resistant to making that adjustment to doing that as well. And I love the way that they handled the conversation. Micah basically was saying to Paul, I don't need you to love this, but I need you to try it. And that is fair. A lot of times we put those expectations on our partners that they need to not only do something, but they need to love it as well. And I appreciated that she says, just be open to trying this. He originally was kind of like, I'm definitely not going to do it. And then he was like, you know what? I can promise you that I will try. So I really, really loved that they were able to come to a compromise on that. You could tell they were getting a little short. When you have these conversations with your partner about kids, about where you're going to live, about money, the tension is going to be there most of the time, because these are really big things that we're taught are extremely important in our entire lives. We create visions of what our future is going to look like. And when you and your partner don't have the same vision, it is stressful to let go of these ideas that we have been holding on to. So I love that Paul was not only able to say, hey, he's feeling stressed, but he was able to try to account for what Micah's feeling too. He's like,
It's real stress. And I think that I'm feeling that right now, and I imagine you probably are as well.
Yeah.
that's a way of saying, I get it. this is a really hard thing to talk about. Yes, I'm having a hard time. You can tell that, but I recognize that you're having a hard time too. It's the conversation that's hard, not the relationship as a whole. And it's very important to externalize that problem. You don't want to look at every single stress point as a representation of your entire relationship. You want to be able to compartmentalize, this is something that's stressing us out, but my partner can actually help me find a solution to this. My partner themselves may not be the problem. And so in that moment, when he's able to say that he's feeling stressed and try to figure out what she's feeling, I thought that was really great communication that's going to help disarm those defense mechanisms that come up as soon as we feel the need to protect ourselves. They have Chelsea's birthday party. And yet again, just as Micah might be gaining some traction and like, okay, maybe she is a good person, she's seen her ways, we see that she's saying inappropriate things that Kwame still, she's like,
I still feel that. Like when I see you, it's like there's so much like electricity and like I feel like we have so much potential.
why would you say that if you are committed to moving forward with Paul? You are trying to once again have your cake and eat it too. You want to see if things work out with Paul and leave the door open with Kwame. Like I really feel like he was trying to take every opportunity to convince Kwame not to say yes at the altar with Chelsea, just in case Paul said no, so that she and Kwame could be together. Like she's trying to keep someone available as a backup plan. And it's so selfish. That is the same thing that she was essentially doing in the pods. I mean, Paul would say things to Micah like, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid of losing you. So he's opening up and Micah's just listening. Like the best she offers is like, I mean, like, I love you, not that invested. And then especially after we see the way that she talks to Kwame.
I think about you, I worry about you, I'm hoping that you're happy. Like I do really like feel like that intense like care for you that I always did.
It's just so inappropriate. Up until even their wedding, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to happen. When Paul said no, I respected him for it because I can understand if you've been with someone and you don't feel like you're getting all of them. I think that's what he was trying to communicate. He messed up by saying that he couldn't see Micah as a mother. As women, we can be very sensitive to what it means to be a good mother. And I think that's part of why in the reunion, Vanessa got so upset about that, is that, you know, many of us have doubts about what it looks like to be a good mother. And, you know, mothers are represented a lot of times either as angels or as the reason why a person is completely screwed up. So there's a lot of pressure when it comes to motherhood. So for a man to comment on whether or not someone could be a good mother feels very sexist as well as just unkind. But I really respected the way that Paul clarified himself in the reunion. What he said made sense. Vanessa was like, are you as confused as I am? And I'm like, what's confusing about what he's saying? He's saying that he felt like there was a nurturing element missing from their relationship. He took accountability for that by saying that he doesn't know if he was contributing to an atmosphere within the relationship where Michael would be comfortable to fully open up and express that nurturing, loving side of herself. From what I saw, she seemed completely guarded as Paul was trying bit by bit to open up and share how he was feeling. Well, why didn't you tell her that? I am a huge advocate for communication, especially when our needs are not being met. So I do think there was more of an opportunity for Paul to say to Micah, I'm needing this from you. Like, I don't feel like you're fully opening up. At the same time, I can understand his logic for why he didn't. If he believes this is Micah's character and he's essentially asking her to be a different person than she naturally is, then you're asking someone to change who they are for you. And I can completely understand why that is not something he would want to do with someone that he's targeting spending a life with. They did try to date after the show and it did not work out. I thought that Paul thought his decisions all the way through. And I think there was a part of me that was relieved that they didn't get married because we were privy to the conversations that Micah was having with Kwame, and I wasn't sure if Paul actually was. So I was concerned that he would say yes and then see how disrespectful she was being to their relationship and have regret. So this was a best case scenario. Just don't get married, keep dating. And we were able to see that when they did that, it didn't last. I know that Micah was very upset and disappointed with the outcome with the wedding. And I know that she was going to say yes, but I think that Micah was going to say yes because it was so important to her that her mother be at her wedding. When you are experiencing major family changes, you often are thinking in terms of how can I expedite my life so that the milestones I envision these family family members that they can be there. I think it was a bigger deal for Micah that her mother would be able to be at her wedding than how important it even was who that person she was marrying was. That's just an assumption if her mom has experienced severe health issues in the past. However, that is not enough to sustain a marriage. Ultimately, Paul said that Vanessa had personal bias, and I completely agree with him. That interview was not handled in a way where I think he was able to really express how he was feeling in a safe environment. And I don't really think Micah took a ton of accountability. Zach suggested that Micah never intended to marry Paul and that was not the conversations that she was having. Sounds like he got that information from Irina, so I can't really fully trust that. I think Micah was going to say yes, and I think it made sense for her to want Paul to answer first because Paul is so analytical and he had already expressed to her that he was afraid of losing her. I respected the fact that Micah didn't want someone to just be with her because they were afraid of losing her. So I can understand why she did that, but I also think it goes back to Micah likes to be in control. She wants the power. She doesn't want to say yes to Paul and then he says no to her. I do think that was her ultimate fear. Even though she's saying she didn't want to say yes to him and he says yes just because she said yes, I think her real fear was her saying yes and him saying no. Just as in the very beginning, they didn't want to be rejected by each other, so they chose to just move forward with each other and dump the other people that they were talking to. It's the exact same logic. So I don't think that Micah really was as worried about Paul saying yes as she was about him saying no. She did admit that she was going to say yes, so it's pretty similar. We know that that is what she was going to do. That is my breakdown for Paul and Micah. I appreciate anybody who's in the live chat with me. I love talking with you guys. You know, we've probably been adding to this conversation through the live chat. If you're watching this a little bit later, feel free to check that instant chat out to see other things that we may have talked about in there. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and as always, share your video requests for me, especially the ones that might not be film or TV requests, but I want those too. You know, I know you guys want more Love is Blind content, and we've got the other couples coming up, so you didn't have to watch all the way until the end, but you did, and I appreciate you so much for doing that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.